Hi, it's Andrew and welcome to another edition of the Performance Intelligence Podcast, the podcast about all things human performance. Optimize performance through adapting your physical, psychological, and emotional state. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Emma Seppälä. Emma is a psychologist and research scientist, a best-selling author, a lecturer at Yale, and an international keynote speaker whose work has transformed the way we think about happiness, emotional intelligence, and social connection. Emma consults to Fortune 500 companies, including Google and Facebook, and her groundbreaking research has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Harvard Business Review, and Time magazine. Her latest book, Sovereign, you've got to get it. It's a cracker, exploring deeper dimensions of leadership and connection. And in today's conversation, Emma and I are going to dive into the science of focus, talk about the differences between idleness and mindfulness, and how to master attention in a distracted world. Whether you're an executive or a business leader, a coach or an athlete, or someone just wanting to thrive in life, Emma's insights will inspire and empower. Dr. Emma Seppälä, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. I was introduced to you by Michael Gervais on his podcast, Finding Mastery, and I found as I listened to it more and more, I'm like, yes. I mentioned before we went on air and I bought your book, Sovereign, your latest book. You're a prolific author. I've gifted that book to a number of coaches I work with. So I thought we've got to go to the source, get you on and talk about, I'd like to introduce you to our audience, tell them a bit about you. You've got a fascinating background. We then can talk about mindfulness and idleness, and I love your delineation or frame on those two. Want to look at what the science says as a researcher, and you're not just a researcher, you're an interpreter. I love how you take science and rigor, which can sometimes overwhelm people, and you make it sticky. But you've got to tell us, what's the latest on focus? And then we're going to open up your book and talk about a course you've got. I'd love our audience to be introduced to you. So let's go back. Who are you and how did you get into what you're doing?
Thank you. I grew up in Paris, France, which, can sound very romantic, but it was actually kind of a negative place to grow up in, even though it was so beautiful and everything. The philosophy on the streets was one of complaint and criticism. So it's kind of a downer. As a child growing up there, you kind of think like things are always going to hell in a handbasket. Then I moved to the US and I saw, wow, like they don't have time for complaint here. People are much more positive. And I really loved that mindset. But I also saw after a couple of years that Americans believe they are what they do. And they would drive themselves into the ground with work. And there's some suffering from that. After that, I went to China for a couple of years and lived there for a couple of years and saw people who had really nothing and were so grateful for everything. And they were so resilient and so powerful and what I would call sovereign, in that despite having nothing, they were so energized, had such a mindset that was so resilient, that was grateful, that was energetic because of that gratitude, because of that hope, even though they were living in a house with no window, with broken windows and 7 generations, all together, like squished, So then I was like, wow, like we live in the West. There's people that have everything and they're grateful and for nothing, and they're not happy. And here are people who have nothing and are so grateful and are so resilient. What's going on here?
That's a fascinating way of growing up, isn't it? So a true global citizen, because when you started that, it jolted me. Like growing up in France, you'd think, yeah, we have this romanticism about what a beautiful place, and waking up, bonjour, and you're cycling along the beautiful paths. But yeah, your experience was different. So that obviously, did that tap into you as a young person, an intrigue and trying to understand it, or did that only happen when you moved to America?
I mean, the good news is when I was really little, I was in an international American school where there was positivity and they did encourage you to believe in yourself. I think if I'd been in the French system the whole time, I don't know if I would have believed in myself enough to even leave the country. You know what I mean? And so I had that glimmer of hope that was put in when I was young at that international American school before I joined the French system. So I think I always had a seed that there's something else out there. But when I realized being in all those 3 countries was, wow, like resilience is in the mind. It has nothing to do with your environment, because you can be a crummy environment and still be so freaking resilient. And that got me into doing a master's. I did a master's in East Asian studies to go deeper into like, what is it about countries like China, but also India? People had nothing and were so resilient. And I thought, what's going on here? This is something, there's a wealth, and I would call it a mental wealth that is there that we are poor in. We could be so comfortable, and yet you don't see that same kind of aliveness. I was talking with someone the other day who was saying, people just seem half alive. Sometimes you look at people and you're like, wow, like what happened? When you're a little child who's happy and feels safe, obviously, they are just exuberant with themselves. Like they are themselves in full exuberance of being alive, grateful. And here you have adults that are like, is anybody in there? You know what I mean? And so anyway, it just made me think like there's something, what's going on here? And so I did a master's in Indo-Tibetan, East Asian studies and in New York City, because I was wondering like, what is it about some of these practices in Asia that are giving people this mental sovereignty, this inner strength that I'm seeing? And it was also 9/11 at that time. So I witnessed the second plane crashing into the towers. And after that, I had a lot of anxiety. So here I was studying about like meditation, things like that as an academic, but I wasn't practicing it. And then I started to want to practice it, and I didn't know where to start. I ended up really benefiting from a breathing practice called skybreath meditation. And I decided, I want to do a PhD in psychology and do as a research scientist and see if I can do research on these practices and give people more of that mental sovereignty. I had witnessed in China and India, and for myself, I had witnessed the benefit after the trauma of 9/11. So that's how I got into my field and really studying the science of happiness, the science of resilience, the science of what makes for a fulfilling life. Yeah. And then I've worked with veterans with trauma. I've worked with college students. I've worked with active duty military. I've worked with teenagers. It's just been a really a wonderful experience. And, my goal is how do we get people to reclaim their sovereignty, that inner strength, resilience that we're all, that they had as children then, it's our birthright.
I think Rip Van Winkle said you can become an overnight success in 20 years. And I love talking to people like you, and you pull on that red thread. So who would have thought growing up in Paris and then coming back to America and then time in China just tapped that curiosity? I've got to just close out. What languages do you speak? How many different languages? French,
German, and English are native. And then I speak some Chinese and some Spanish.
Yeah. Phenomenal for your brain. So then you're following the bouncing ball. And again, that's why I love when you meet people, you read the book and go, what is it that drives this person? So then studying East Asian studies. So you didn't get into psychology straight away. I find that fascinating as well, that you've got this broad range. Have you ever met David Epstein, or have you read David's book, Range?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That collective sum of experiences gets you to where you are today. So you went broad, that diverse cultural experience, different languages. I've spent a bit of time in India. I used to work in cricket. And you're so true. A nation with just extreme poverty, but then you sometimes watch a young kid with a piece of stick and a rubber ball playing cricket, and they're just so freaking happy. And then you wonder what goes wrong when we have, in inverted commas, everything. Yet you said as well, we're mental wealth, but we're poor in those other areas. So yeah, fascinating setup to our conversation. Gosh, there's so many rabbit holes we could go down. Thank goodness I did a rough frame. And I will just double click though as well, your husband was a Marine as well. So before we went on, we were talking about the work we do in defence as well with wonderful men and women who literally defend our nations. And you've done a lot of work around that as well, which we'll get into also. Mindfulness, a buzzword in many ways here in the corporate world now. When you go to India, they laugh because 2,500 years ago, the yogis were practicing mindfulness, and similar time in Japan, the samurais 2,500 years ago were mindful before they went into battle. Do you laugh sometimes when people go, oh, I heard this podcast with maybe Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL, and all the SEALs are doing mindfulness. Where do you sit on the evolution of mindfulness, and how do you use that in your practice and your teaching?
It started in India and probably more like 10,000 years ago.
10,000, yeah, wow.
Yeah, there's some archaeological evidence of people sitting in meditation.
So it's not new. We can agree on that.
It's not new. I think meditation, I'm going to call it meditation, but mindfulness I see as a form of meditation. That may work for you or not. There are many forms. But meditation is absolutely essential if you want to become more sovereign, if you want to become more resilient, more centered and grounded, especially now. Why? Never before have we received so much information coming our way through our technology, through our entertainment, and our media as now, ever. And it's such an extreme time of information overload, but at the same time, a speed of life, that the only way we can balance that is if we balance it with doing the opposite, which is shutting down our senses, shutting down activity, closing our eyes, and being still for a while. And that allows you to be resilient in the stormy, fast-paced highway of our life. So that would be my general umbrella for that. And the research shows meditation practice improves emotional intelligence. It improves cognitive function, which is, attention, memory, and focus. It improves sleep. It improves stress resilience. So you're going to be less stressed in a stressful situation. And it also improves your well-being and your happiness levels, which we know also improve your physical performance and abilities, by the way. So it's like a gold mine that everybody's sitting on and does know about, but all they need to do is dig. That's it, because it's free. Okay, so that's meditation. Now, mindfulness is one form of meditation, and which involves paying attention to your thoughts, your breath, and your sensations in your body, etc. And it got a lot of attention because psychologists have focused on that form of meditation as a phenomenon to research. And because it has been researched, it's gotten more popular. However, I don't think mindfulness works for everyone. For example,
Bing! I am so happy you've said that, because I do practice some forms of mindfulness. With a lot of my athletes, I've built in moving meditation. So go for a walk. If you've got a dog, take your dog. But there's a caveat. Don't take your bloody mobile phone, and just be present, connecting with your breath. So I'll let you keep going. But I do think sometimes it's been sold as the panacea. You've got to practice mindfulness. And if you don't, you're not going to be an entrepreneur and take on the world. And you're not going to get to a high level in your performance. So different people do respond to different modalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to tell you, for myself, I'm an academic. I'm already really busy in my head. And mindfulness, one of my theories I have for why I got so much attention from scientists is because it keeps them in the same paradigm they already are in, which is observing things, labeling them objectively. That's what a scientist is supposed to do anyway. And so, but it keeps you in that same paradigm. And for me, I'm already in that paradigm. Like, that actually is not helpful for me. In fact, I think and I have seen this, it can make some people really neurotic. I remember going to lunch with this mindfulness teacher, and I said, oh gosh, this science group that I was working with, I was like, oh, they're taking forever. It's really hard to work with them. And she said to me, no judgment. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, do you walk around thinking no judgment all the time? Like, it's just a little neurotic, honestly. And I was like, if we don't have judgment, how would we know what restaurant to go to, Anyway, but the point being, it can work for some people, but we know that working with veterans with trauma, it was not the right approach for them. I know the hospital we were working with, they were getting all these veterans dropping out. And I was like, yeah, I get it. Because for me, after 9/11, I tried to do mindfulness meditation. I had way too much anxiety from that's the trauma of being in 9/11. And I would sit there and be like, yeah, I'm super aware that I'm anxious. That's not helpful, right? So we ended up doing research on an active breathing practice called skybreath meditation, which is what had helped me. So 10 years later, I'm working with veterans with trauma, and I'm thinking, let's try this because it helped me. And, the veterans that were in our study were very kind of show me. They had this show me attitude, and very, they were just there for the money that they were getting paid. And they were like, what's this hippy dippy, fill in the blank kind of thing. And and I was like, that's fine. I was like, be skeptical. That's what we want, you know? But then within minutes of doing breathing, you know, some of the veterans I remember were like, oh my gosh, I haven't felt this calm.
I feel relaxed, calm. You can change state.
Yeah, and they didn't realize. And then, you know, I get things like, oh, this is why we think we smoke. It's all that deep breathing. I'm like, yeah, and you could do it without the cigarette. But in any case.
So I was saying that's why we smoke, because we're breathing. I say that when I'm working with, we call in Australia blue collar workers or labourers. Cigarette break is awesome. And they look at you and go, what? And you see the leaders in HR go, who is this heretic? I go, it's awesome. Like when you take that breath in, but then when you light it up, you just kill everything, literally. So if you can have a cigarette break without the cigarette, that's going to do your body wonders, and all those beautiful state shifts, physical, psychological, emotional, that's what you need to practice.
I love that. Absolutely. And so, you know, what I tend to tell people is, yes, meditate, do it for 40 days to give yourself a chance to dig through that gold mine you're sitting on. Don't walk by it. You know, I always say, what's the difference between a skeptical and a cynical scientist? The cynical scientist will say, that's not going to work. I'm not going to do the experiment. The skeptical scientist will be like, that's not going to work, but I'll do the experiment. And that's what I encourage, you know, 40 days and then use, you know, what can really help. What helps me also is like a guided meditation. You know, I use an app called Sattva, Sattva.
We'll put that in the show notes. Can you spell that again?
TTVA.
TTVA.
I've actually donated a couple of my meditations to them, but I don't get any profit from. So this is not an advertisement, but yeah, I just feel like, you know, just turn it on and meditation happens for you. Like you just need to sit there like you're getting a massage and just relax, you know. It's not pressure. You know, for some people, they get instructions like, all right, just focus on your breath, sit there for 20 minutes. That's torture for a lot of people. You know, it's no easy task. So again, meditation, yes. Is it key to many, many things? Yes, possibly. Do the experiment, try it. You know, I always also say, like, don't believe me unless it's a result of your own experience. I stole that from the Buddha. The Buddha actually said that, but I love that because I think we get stuff thrown at us all the time, like do this, do that. And it's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, okay, just do the experiment. 40 days, use an app if it's easy, or learn an active breathing technique like the skybreath meditation that we studied. That was so good for trauma and anxiety.
Well, there's a couple of paths I need to go down this. I have an ex-girlfriend, I underline ex, who was a meditation teacher. Sounds like that person you went out with, no judgment. She used to stress me out because she was trying to schedule in so much. She'd wake up and then she read about, you know, sun gazing and then meditation, and just her day was so bloody scheduled on all these relaxation apps. It gave her anxiety. And when I had the audacity to say that, we had this massive argument. I thought, I don't think this is really the right relationship for either of us. So her obsession about focusing on relaxing and following all these Eastern philosophies caused her and everyone around her so much stress. 40 days, interesting, because the research I've seen on mindfulness and meditation, the minimum effective dose, looks like it's about 6 minutes a day. I think the magic really happens up around 20 to 25 minutes.
I would recommend that, more like 20.
20, yeah. So for 40 days, you're looking at every day about 20 minutes a day. Is that the protocol?
I think that's a minimum protocol. And honestly, some people are like, well, I don't have time. Like I have kids, or I don't have time. I'm so busy. It's like, yeah, well, you know, I'm busy too. Like I have kids like wake me up at 5:30 in the morning, and I work several jobs. I've got responsibilities. But guess what? When I do my practice, the return on investment is so great. I show up for my kids patient. I show up for my work focused. I show up for my work creative and innovative. I have ideas that come to mind, you know, in meditation. I show up as my best self, you know, and when I go to bed at night, I mostly don't regret my behavior that day or you know what I mean? It's not something you have to do. It's something that allows you to be centered within yourself so you can show up as your best self. You know, that's it. And interestingly, when people do actually do the 40 days, they're like, oh, my partner noticed first. They think I'm so zen. I'm like, see, other people will tell you, you know, other people will notice.
I had a CEO last week. I just said to him, do a month. He said, I'm so busy. I said, look, research the magic at that 20 to 25 minutes. I'll meet you halfway. Just do 10 minutes. I said, can you do 10 minutes a day? And he looked at me. I'd snookered him. I caught him. He said, okay. So do 10 minutes a day for 30 days. And if it doesn't work, just trash me. Like, I put out a press release that I am just the worst practitioner you've ever worked with. And we had a little bet that he'd have to buy me lunch or I'd buy him lunch if it didn't work. So I rock up after 30 days and he walks in like Jar Jar Binks out of Star Wars. You know, he's got this totally different walk, his demeanour. I said, I don't even have to ask how you're going. He wasn't looking at his mobile. He wasn't fidgeting. I said, so can you just play back what's happening in your life? He said, I thought you were an idiot after 7 days, but I had the lunch bet in the back of my mind. And we said we may have bought a nice bottle of wine as well, Emma. You use the levers you've got, right? He said, then around that 2-week mark, my wife said to me, what's going on? He said, what do you mean? And she said, you're listening to me and you're actually asking me questions and pausing. You haven't done this back since we dated and you were trying to impress me. His kids noticed as well, his teenage kids had said to his wife, what's going on with Dad? Is everything cool? And then he said, I just realised that I've been a bit of an asshole. And I've just been interacting and I've been trying to run the house like a CEO and there's no org chart at home. Well, there is. I'm below the dog. And he did that and he laughed. He said, with grace and just this humour that he hadn't had before. And I thought it was just beautiful that he'd slow down and just practice this. I call it pulsing, to move from periods of high intensity, which is awesome. You do that in defence, you do that in sport, you do that in academia, and then you just got to pulse and drop down and just really connect and be. And it was just beautiful, Emma, hearing him play that back. Such a simple practice, as you said, 10,000 years it's been around. But we get so caught up, don't we?
It's amazing. I love this story. And the other thing is that, people who say they don't have time, like, oh, really? So how much time do you spend scrolling on the internet or scrolling on Netflix?
Give me your mobile. I say, give me your phone and go to your history. And the average in Australia now, it's about 4 hours and 17 minutes a day. You're telling me you can't do 10 or 20 minutes?
Right, exactly. And I think people don't realize that. And they also maybe don't realize the return on investment, right? It's like, well, what should I do sitting there not doing anything? I was like, well, because of how it's going to happen afterwards, the rest of your day,
If you could give people a potion, as you went through those benefits, the cognitive benefits, the relationship benefits, as you said as well, it's also good for physical because when you're relaxed in a good mindset, you'll train more. What's the last thing you feel like doing when you're tired, fatigued, distracted? You don't feel like exercising. It's the last thing you feel like doing. But if you could give people a pill, a potion or a bottle or a lotion that had all of those physical, psychological, emotional, I'd even go as far as saying spiritual. Can you imagine how much let's say we went into business. Let's buy the magic potion and you can get that. We would be billionaires, Dr. Emma. But when you then tell people, it's chilling out for 15 or 20 minutes, no, that shit's too hard. Where's my phone? Right?
No, I mean, it's true. I just was creating a reel on Instagram around this. And I was like, what if I told you that in 15 minutes a day, you could, become more focused, have better attention, have better sleep, have better relationships, have better emotional intelligence, be happier. You do it? Well, then meditate. You know what I mean? But it's like, why? It's like you said, it's just so funny. It's so funny how, again, we don't realize that. But that's the goal. That's the goal. Like, let people know that they're sitting on a gold mine, and meditation is such a profound place to get in touch with your own innate creativity and innovative thought. Forget about that. I know I wrote both of my books mostly in meditation or on hikes, both of which were without my phone, obviously when I'm hiking and stuff. That's when you're setting your mind up for active problem solving, for innovative insights, for peace and rest. Like right before this recording, I've been quite tired. We've been at home sick. The kids have been sick. Me too. And I was feeling quite tired. So I just went and I meditated for 15 minutes and I feel great now. I was like, I know I need to meditate before I get on.
I love how you said you wrote your book hiking. I wrote my last book on a bike and in the ocean. And it is that that state, I even had a process where you're getting into that flow, or when you're focusing on exercise or the breath. And I've got a couple of questions on moving meditation as well. And then I'd get off the bike, or I'd get out of the ocean, and then I'd get my mobile and then just go idea. It was amazing, the cascade of ideas when I got out of my head. I see this so often. I see this a lot with academics. I imagine with academics, you must rub them up, agitate them a little bit, which we'll come back to as well. I love that. But with some academics, and a lot of what people I think have learned at school in the traditional system, you go to school for a set amount of time and you do this, and we don't really teach different ways of learning and creativity. But when you tap into that and you push, and we're shifting brainwaves, and then you come back and I just find I've got a cascade of ideas. So I love hearing that you do that as well. I've done that for years.
Absolutely. And that's, going into that idleness conversation you were interested in moving into, which is that, geniuses like Einstein or Salvador Dali, they both knew that in order to get their creative insights, they had to go into this alpha wave mode. So when the brain is in this relaxed, meditative state of mind. And Einstein would go and listen to Mozart or play Mozart, which research shows also leads to this sort of meditative alpha wave mode. And Salvador Dali would sit back in a rocking chair and close his eyes and go into this meditative space. And whenever he would, drop, he would have a key in his hand. And whenever he dropped it because he fell asleep, it would wake him up. He would grab it and he would keep going. So he could keep being in that space, and he'd come up with those, really innovative paintings that he created. And Einstein had his insights come to him in those moments, and he knew that. And he has this beautiful quote, which is, "Intuition is a divine gift, and logic is a faithful servant. We have created a society where we honor the servant and have thrown away the gift." And, intuition and innovation, they're very similar. Creativity, you can think of it very much as a conglomerate of similar things. Because what is creativity? You're coming up with something novel. What is intuition? You're coming up with something also seemingly out of the blue, right? They're very similar. And they both, research shows, neuroscience shows that when you are in that alpha wave mode, that's when you're most likely to come up with those aha insights. That's when your brain is in active problem solving mode behind the scenes while you are, quote unquote, being idle or resting or, hiking with your dog without your phone or whatever it is. And when you actively practice that daily, the level of creativity, and what you're saying is so true about the kids. School is like traditional schools about rote learning.
Stop daydreaming. Stop looking out the window, little Emma. Get back. Well, looking out the window, Dr. Andrew Huberman now talks about that. You've got the panoramic reframe. There's loads of data to show when you wander off and daydream and change some of those brainwave states, and then get off your devices, and that myopic view that then it shifts all of our thinking to become small. And then when you daydream and come back, whoop, you have an increase. So a lot of the natural practices that we do, again, as a young kid, that joy, that wonder. Like my 3-year-old this yesterday morning, I said, "What are you doing today, Millie?" She said, "I'm catching up with my friends." And she's just so excited. Just like, I catch it, like that joy, that awe. It's such a shame, isn't it, that we get to the stage in life, you said we're almost the walking dead. It's inside us. It's all there. It's so simple in many ways, but we stuff it up beautifully, don't we? We try and make everything so complex, so difficult.
Yeah. And so I think going back into meditation and connecting with yourself allows you to also discern, like, oh, all the headlines in the news are negative. Does that mean everything that's happening on the planet every day is negative? No. There's people, taking care of happy families and so forth. You just don't learn about that. So it helps you to discern, like, wait a second, like, what is this? You know what I mean? It's just, we know that fear activates your sympathetic nervous system, and then you're going to click on the thing, and then you're going to click on the ad. That's what the entertainment industry is based on, and the news and so forth. And discernment allows you to be like, wait a sec, I'm going to pull my energy back from that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'm going to spend more time on things that are more nourishing, more life enhancing. So that's really, really powerful. Not only you're getting in touch with your innovative, intuitive potential, but you're becoming discerning about in your own life. Okay, what is life-giving? What is not life-giving? And how am I going to choose to live my life, in order to be at my maximum performance? I'm not at my maximum performance if I'm reading the news all day. I'm not at my max performance if I'm constantly distracted. I'm not at my max performance if I buy into beliefs that I need to look like this, buy this, consume this, but I am at my maximum performance when I can center in on who I am, honor myself, be in that quiet space, remember who I am, what my values are, and then show up as I am, really focused. And that's where my performance is not hindered by all of these messagings coming from the world.
So I've got to ask you about moving meditation. Do you build that into your practice? Do you teach that to your clients?
So, I have done moving meditation in sort of like Buddhist type environments. But I do sitting meditation or lying down meditation because I feel like with movement, it's so easy to come out of the meditation because you're observing and so forth. But what I do is I go take walks in nature without my phone. So is that a moving meditation? I don't think so because I'm thinking about things. But it is getting me in alpha wave mode. So I am, like I said, I got my ideas, like literally a fully formed sentences coming in my head about the book that I would just dictate into my notes. My phone is on airplane mode, but I would have the notes function open. So I would distinguish that because I find that my mind is much more active. So it's a beautiful thing, but
is it a good gateway to someone starting? And this is
yes.
This is very much asked on personal. When you have a podcast or you do a discussion, sometimes you're asking for the masses. This is purely for myself, just to make sure I'm doing this right. But if you can get athletes to be still, if you can get executives to be still, wonders happen. But to go from where they are to 20 to 25 minutes a day meditation, for a lot of people, they're just not going to do it. So I do find that act of, hey, go for a walk, a slow walk. If it's a bike ride, it's a slow ride, not on Strava. Or it could be a very slow swim or a paddle in the ocean, and just connect with your breathing. And I find that's a start that they can then get confidence, so that confidence competence loop, and then they can build up to more. I just wanted to get your frame as an expert in this field.
I love that. And so for me, working with high trauma, high anxiety populations like veterans with trauma, this is where breathing came in, active breathing. Now people are talking about it a lot. Nobody was talking about it 10 years ago. They were like, oh, isn't that just meditation?
Like, I've been breathing for 35 years. What are you on about?
Yeah, it's like, it's not meditation. It is changing your breath so you can change your nervous system and come to a calmer state. So that's when so that's another really great gateway for people because they'll notice, all of a sudden their nervous system is calmer. So when they're sitting there, their anxiety is lower. So there's short breathing practices like that you can do, and they can calm you down, and then you can meditate. And then there's longer protocols like the one that we researched, skybreath meditation, which is a practice that originally comes from India through a nonprofit called Art of Living. And I had originally learned it at Columbia in the university where I was after 9/11, and I had so much anxiety. And again, later, 10 years later, I found out there was a nonprofit teaching it to veterans called Project Welcome Home Troops. And so I partnered with them to run our study with veterans and saw, wow, like within a week, their anxiety was normalized and many of them no longer qualified as having post-traumatic stress, even a month and a year later. So that 1 week of that active protocol that they were doing 20, 25 minutes a day had such an effect of kind of resetting the nervous system.
So the 20 to 25 minutes is sky breath meditation or sky breath breathing?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the home practice that you get, but many of them didn't even do the home practice, but just going through the class itself had sort of reset their nervous system to normality.
Can you tell me, what is sky breath? I haven't heard of that.
It's a set of breathing practices based in the yoga tradition, but different. They're not something you would learn in a yoga class, and they have like different techniques and rhythms. You kind of have to learn it from an instructor through the nonprofit called Art of Living. Or for veterans and military, they can learn it at no cost through a nonprofit called Project Welcome Home Troops. I'm happy to connect you. Also, there are some instructors in Australia.
That'd be awesome, yeah. And we'll put the connection in the show notes.
Yeah. I have friends who I know teach in Australia. So,
okay, awesome. On the Finding Mastery podcast, when you're talking to Michael, you said idleness is having no agenda and it's just being. It's similar to what children do. I said it earlier, when you daydream, I was taught, no, stop daydreaming, Andrew, pay attention.
Yeah.
Is idleness very similar to daydreaming?
Yes. And we live in a time when we never do that because a lot of people roll over when they wake up and look at their phone. So you're immediately programming your mind because you are what you eat is true of your mind. So the first thing you look at is your phone. That phone is going right in your mind and programming you. Maybe you're getting anxiety from an email that came in asking you for something. Maybe you have FOMO from something you're seeing. Maybe you, all of a sudden, that is imprinted on you. And you're starting your day like that. And you could go all day long just consuming all the time. Like we used to stand in line at the grocery store, right? Just stand in line. But now we can be on our phones.
Do you remember we used to take videos back? I was having a conversation to a mate the other day, blockbuster video. And you say that to a young group now, they're like, what? Video? Yeah. And you used to have to rewind the video. And if you didn't take it back on time, you got fined. They're like, what about Netflix? So we didn't have Netflix. So it's interesting, isn't it? Back as a kid, you had to wait for a library book. So we were teaching patients. There was an idleness or there was a presence. You just didn't get everything drop and drag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but the point is that you can go all day without being idle because looking at your phone is not idleness. You're actively focusing. So you're not in that receptive, intuitive, creative space. And you're not just that, but you're also getting imprinted with whatever is in front of you. So you are, and then if your mind feels cluttered or anxious or depressed or stressed, those are the emotions that get evoked when you're looking at different stuff. Maybe you're looking at something beautiful and inspiring. That's different. But if you're not, how much of the stuff that people are consuming on a daily basis is inspiring and helpful? I don't know. But your mind is, our ancestors would never have had to deal with as many emotions as we do just checking our phone and reading 10 messages. Like each one can evoke a different emotion, It's a lot on our system.
As I talk to you, my brain trying to find patterns and order and pull all this together, it feels like there's almost a continuum from distracted, where your attention's just darting all over the place, and society is geared up to do that, to then idleness, where you're just sort of dropping in and paying attention and tapping into that wisdom. And then you've got mindfulness, where you are really shifting that focus. And I like that delineation for you, that mindfulness is a form of meditation, because I think we often get the two confused. And then you've got full engagement. So wouldn't it be nice if we could just build these protocols in where you're shifting during the day? And I know you talk a lot about that, and we'll get right into the brainwaves. You've mentioned this a few times. And I'll just frame for people. There's at least 5 different brainwaves we know. There's gamma waves. That's a high level of cognitive functioning and peak mental activity. So a lot of people listening to this, you are employed for your gamma and also your beta waves. So beta waves is alert and engaged and active thinking. Can you imagine that in a job interview? Hi, Emma, sit down. We would really love to help you tap into your gamma and beta waves. You're like, who are these crazy people? Then we've got alpha. And I say this in a lot of my teaching, Emma. You got to get out of those high brain waves and then go alpha. You just got to drop the intensity a little bit of your pulse. That's relaxed. It's associated with being calm, creative, and a state of restfulness. Then you've got theta, where you get into the deep relaxation, the light sleep. It's almost when you're in bed, for people listening to this, if you're just dropping, you just feel like your body's dropping, and you can sometimes catch we're really downregulating. And delta is that deep sleep and when we're unconscious with regeneration and restorative processes. So is that right? The hierarchy you teach, you got gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta.
Yeah.
Now it sounds complex, but you've mentioned this a number of times, and you've done research as well. A lot of the wonderful work you do with veterans. Everything you've been talking about is really around that shift or pulsing between brainwaves. But if we don't consciously have some frameworks around this, or consciously do a lot of the great work that you teach, we just get stuck in those high-end brainwaves. And then, as you said, we lead to a state where we're just walking dead, or we're just walking around in this catatonic state.
It's true. And when we spend more time in alpha wave mode than meditating and dropping in, then when we have to perform, where our energy is so focused and so powerful, as opposed to when it's been distracted all over the place, and then you're supposed to get up there and perform, and how can you focus, right? But the alpha wave both relaxes the focus and puts you in touch with your creative potential, but it rests you as well. And then when you're on, then you can be so on. I remember one of the veterans in our study, he was feeling, a lot more relaxed after learning the skybreath meditation. And he said to me, this is really helping, but I'm a little worried. Like, what if I lose my edge? He was a Marine. And I said, don't worry, you're not going to lose your edge, but you're going to have your edge when you need it. You don't have to be on edge all the time. When you need your stress response to go up because you're on go mode, it will. But you don't need to be in go mode all the time because that is draining your resources. You know, people who are constantly in high stress, high demand, high focus all the time. First of all, they're not sleeping at night, but also they're draining their resources. We don't remember that. You know, it's about energy management. Why are people so tired when they come home from work at night? It's like, why? Were you laying bricks? Were you building buildings? No. You're just checking some emails and doing some meetings. Why are you so tired? It's because people adopt this go, 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 high stress mentality all day long. High caffeine, high go, go, go. But when you drop in and you use that alpha wave moments, maybe you're meditating at lunch, maybe you're meditating between meetings, whatever. Then you come back, you can be in go mode from a place of fullness, not from, borrowing energy from tomorrow that you don't have today through over caffeinating.
Interesting you say that about one of the people you work with in military, because the US have a term I know of at the high end or the pointy end about slowing down in order to speed up. So if you're a sniper or SAS, or if you're a paratrooper, you're taught very much to calm, to down-regulate your nervous system, but you're also hyper-aware. But even though there's that phrase and the term, habits and behaviours can override, can't they? Because we get that fix and we think we have to be alert all the time and the central nervous system just gets jacked. Learning that, it's like back to the CEO. When he learned that, because I made him do it for 30 days, he actually went, not only am I not going to lose my edge, I'm actually going to have more range and I'm going to be a much more interesting, a more authentic person rather than just this robot on autopilot.
Oh, absolutely. And the person I was talking to was a trained sniper. But even then, he did not realize. I was like, you know what? You don't need to be stressed all the time. Just need to be in go mode when it's go mode. That's it. And then you're not wasting your energy. You're not draining yourself. Like maybe at 25, it's fine. But if you keep going like that, 35, 45, forget about it. You can be burnt out.
And your research around this, if you're dropping into alpha, you're then sharper? You're getting up into the gamma and beta waves easier? What is your research or what is your practice shown around that?
What I've just noticed is when people are able to do a practice that downregulates their nervous system, they show up in the rest of their life as their best self. Like they are happier. They are naturally more mindful. They're naturally more focused, because you're also allowing the mind to rest. Like we put our body to sleep at night. We're like, sleep. Okay, maybe we use the sleeping pill, whatever they do. We do, right? Because there's so much stress that so many people are having sleep issues. But then we don't do the same with our mind. Like our mind is also needing to rest. That's where meditation and breathing exercises come in. Of course, it's going to be sharper after it's rested. Because otherwise you can go to bed, you maybe watch the news and watch a show and whatever beforehand, and in your dreams, you're just processing. It's exhausting for our mind. And then we wake up and we're tired. It's like, why? Why are you tired? You've been sleeping all night. Because the mind never rested, You
mentioned before 3 words. And it just flowed so well and thought, I've got to ask you a little bit more about that as well. I love the dance talking to you because it's so rich and we sort of go one area but it also just shows the depth and it's not like you just double click on one area. Okay, let's just focus on idleness. Idleness is connected. So there's a red thread for all of it, isn't it? So working on all these different skills together, it's rising the whole way of being a better performer in all domains. But you mentioned around intention, around innovation and around creativity. Can you just explore that a little bit more for me? I was fascinated when you said those 2 areas, that they're different yet related.
The way that I see it, they actually are pretty much the same thing. Intuition and creativity seem like they're the same thing in a way. They actually come about during the same kind of frame of mind. So what research shows is that when you're in alpha wave mode, you're more likely to come up with these aha insights to problems that you've been working on. That's innovation. It's also, you could think of it as intuition, the sense of, okay, I know what I need to do, right? And so the two are very much like an instinct that our brain is made to be in active problem solving mode in those moments. So when people think they're being idle, they're not being idle. Their brain is in active problem solving mode, but they're resting at the same time. It's kind of amazing when you think about it. Earlier today, I was wondering how I was going to solve a problem And I was like, let me go for a walk. And as I'm putting my coat on and zipping up and I'm walking out within 2 minutes, solution came to me, So in terms of intention, make the intention to go into alpha wave mode regularly throughout the day. I take a 5-minute walk. I've got a solution come to mind like that. I was barely across the street, but you're training also yourself. You're training yourself to go back to alpha, training yourself to switch off quickly, maybe on my phone and my computer, I'm off. I'm going for my walk. But I've trained myself to completely switch off. And one of the ways I've done this is I do silent meditation retreats regularly, every 2 months through 3 months. I have kids, like I said, I can't get away for very long, but I can get away for 2 days, 3 days max, And
so you're going silent for the whole 2 days?
Yes. Again, I do this through the Art of Living. So the Art of Living Foundation is where I learned the skybreath meditation and did the research. And they offer these silent retreats that are guided. So it's not so harsh and stark like it's as it sounds. It's guided meditations, guided yoga. But the point is you're in silence. And what happens is you go into this kind of warped space where you're just like, you're in the world, but you're not of it at that moment. You're in your little bubble for 2-3 days. And it's kind of amazing, but you're learning to shift. You're shifting out. I'm shifting out of the programming, out of the messaging, out of this lifestyle, everything. I'm completely meditating, being with nature. That's it. And so I've gotten so used to that. But it's basically training yourself to be in that alpha wave state or not. But we can do this during the day. Like I said, go out for a walk, 5 minutes. I'm in alpha wave. Then I come back, focus. Go meditate, boom, I'm in alpha. Up, come back, do a podcast with you. This is a way of life that's very rich. It's very rich.
I love that. It's that pulsing. It's the high stress, fully engaged, dropping down into alpha and just dancing throughout the day on that. The thread that comes through talking to you, there's many, but there's a really strong one about simplification. We've just made everything so bloody complex. So simplify, go back to basics, go back to the basic teachings, basic physiology, basic self-care and restoration. And we're just so overloaded. Nervous systems are so jacked. You did a really interesting post on LinkedIn where you said one study found that when kids have more toys, now this is at time of recording, we're leading into Christmas, so we're going to be saving parents a fortune with this study, Emma. One study found that when kids have more toys, it actually reduces the quality of their play, making them less creative and more distracted. This highlights an important truth. Less truly can be more. The fewer distractions we have, the more we can focus on what brings us joy and fulfillment. And you referenced an article from Psychology Today. So should we not be buying our children toys for Christmas?
It's an article I wrote for Psychology Today with this. When I saw that study, I just had to write about it. I think children love toys, but can we give them open-ended toys? Can we give them the Lego blocks without necessarily telling them how to build the Lego? What I've noticed with my kids is they love building it, then they never play with it again. But what they really, truly get alive about is using all the Lego pieces from all the different things that they bought and building something new, right? So if we give them open-ended toys like those, little wooden, I have these sticks, they're just little wooden sticks. That's it. It's a bag full of these sticks, but they can pile them up. They can build them around. They can build a train track with them. They can, that's where you're allowing them to use their creativity. Just like, my kids are constantly pulling stuff out of the recycling bin. It's like, why did you throw this cardboard box away, Mom? It's a cat. It's a cat house. I'm like, I'm sorry.
It's and a fortress.
Yeah. So that's the kind of toys we should, and then less is more. So putting out the old, bringing it, that's allowing them, in perhaps when we were kids or prior generations, just go outside and play with the sticks. Kids are so happy in the river playing with sticks and stones and building stuff. It's beautiful. They're naturally love that stuff. We don't need to provide more things that tell them what to do and how to play. They know how to play.
I'm going to get this reference point. My 2 elder kids don't listen to my podcast, I'm sure, but I'm going to get that reference point and say, look, listen to Dr. Emma. Go outside and play with sticks, because I'll often say to them, they'll go, Dad, I'm bored. I'll go outside and make a fort. Go explore. Oh, Dad, you're being such a loser. A client of mine is a good mate of mine now as well. He has 5 kids. And he said, up until the age of 4 or 5, he said, I just should have bought them the box. He said, because you buy a trampoline or you buy a bike and they'll bounce on it and they'll ride it. But then you look up half an hour later and they've got texters and they're creating a fort and it's a police car and then it's a helicopter. And he said, honestly, I just should have bought boxes for the first 4 or 5 years. There's some real wisdom in that, isn't there?
Yeah, so true. But especially from children, we can take that aliveness. They are so alive. Why are so many adults not alive? Not alive like that. They don't have that life in them.
Well, they need to reclaim their life energy and freedom in a time of distraction, uncertainty and chaos. That sounds like a really good strapline for a book, doesn't it?
True. And that's why I wrote that book. And that's my mission too, Let's bring people back to life and connect them to themselves and their own innovative potential, because everyone has their own. And that's the beauty of it, And I look at the planet now and all the problems that the planet has. It's like, wow, what would happen if everyone was at their fullest potential, their fullest innovative, creative, and joyful potential? This planet would be very different. The leaders would probably be better, and there would just be, that's my hope for the future.
This is not a job for you, is it? It's more than a job. I can see the passion. You talk about purpose. A clearly articulated individual purpose. It's 3 things the research shows. Number 1, it's bigger than you. 2, it's future focused. And 3, it excites the living daylights out of you. I can see you're totally on purpose when you're talking about this.
Yes. Yes, indeed. It is.
It lights you up. Now, the book Sovereign, backed by psychological data, neuroscience, and empirically validated methodologies, Sovereign takes us further along the path of personal transformation than we may ever have ventured before and gives a true freedom to live life to our fullest potential. Can we start by the definition of your definition of what does it mean to be sovereign, or what does it mean to have a sovereign life?
It's a life where you're dancing to the beat of your own drum, not that you are rebelling so much against, the world, but that you are in tune with yourself and honoring and authentic to yourself so you can show up as your best self. What does that mean? First, it means self-awareness. Are you aware of who you are? Are you aware of what's controlling you? What fears are controlling you? What traumas are controlling you? What programming is controlling you? For example, most people, I teach leaders and executives at the Yale School of Management, and so many high-level executives, talented individuals are coming through, and 99% of them are highly self-critical, which is research shows leads to self-sabotage. It's different than self-awareness. Self-awareness is, okay, I need help with X. Self-criticism is beating yourself up for it, which most people are running that program. It's one example of how you can keep yourself bound and not show up at your fullest, most powerful potential. Like the couple executives that I meet who don't have that problem are so powerful. They show up very powerfully. Anyway, so that's just, and also addictions and behaviors and so forth can also keep us bound. So the book is an invitation to become more self-aware and so that you can be more discerning and choose what it is and how it is that you want to live. So many people on their deathbed have regrets that they didn't live the life they wanted. And let's not do that.
And so much of it is isn't it? It's external, exogenous, where we're doing activities, maybe from a young age, you're good at something, so then you choose a career path. I've seen this a lot in professional services, a lot in law. It's some of those intellectual pursuits where people get the high marks and then they go down that because maybe mum and dad or the teachers or everyone said, oh, you're smarty pants, so you go and do something like that. Now, I know a lot of people in those vocations who are fully engaged as well, so I'm not just saying you become a lawyer or a consultant and you're not engaged, but I see a disproportionate amount of people, banking and finance as well, they get paid a lot of money. In fact, some of them a fortune. But then they get into their 40s, mid-40s, and they start to go, is this it? I dreamt of going to uni and getting the job and then meeting the girl or the guy and maybe having the kids and then getting the big house and then the holiday home and I'm there. But I'm still not happy. And in fact, when I pull on that thread with them, I say, when were you at your lightest? I love that as a question, Emma. Can you go back in your life? When were you at your lightest? When did you have spark or play or joy? Oh, it was when I was at school. It was when I was at uni and I didn't have all the demands. And then just go, well, how do you create moments of that? Like, why have you created this expectation, this burden? So when you talk about sovereignty, about living the life you want to live, do you see that a lot in your work as well? That people just get stuck. I call it playing the same game, and they wake up a couple of decades later and they're on autopilot, living, doing what they wanted to do, but it hasn't made them happy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I went to Yale as an undergraduate, so I'm on the alumni Facebook group, and one of the admins asked, like, what do you do for a living? And how would you advise younger alumni who want to do that same thing for a living? Pretty innocent question, right? Designed to help the younger people. Most of the people who answered were lawyers and doctors, and they didn't answer the question. They would just talk about how much they hated their job. And they said, don't do things for money or prestige. And it's like, wow, all these people, they followed that, and it gave them, they don't have the life they want. But then interestingly, there was a colleague of mine who looked at Yale undergraduates and asked them, what emotions do they most feel? And they most feel stressed and tired. And then it was like, well, what emotion do you want to feel? Like, what emotion do these high achieving, go, go, go people want to feel? What do you think?
I'd say just joy, connected, like they're making a contribution.
Loved. You think about that. Most high achievers everywhere are desperately running themselves sometimes into the ground with the one desire to be loved, but no amount of achievement or success will make up for the hole in your heart from a lack of love from yourself.
Is that love? There's different definitions of love. Like, I am in love. It's that passionate exchange, sparks when you see that person that lights you up. Or is it more just to be loved?
Loved.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting when you think about that. How many people are doing how many things in order to do what? To be loved. None of those things are probably going to lead to being loved, right? Loved is not something that you get from just success or achievement.
So you can be in a province, a farming community in India or China, which you saw as a young woman, and have no money. Yet you've got love, you feel loved, and life feels great.
That's right. Or you can have everything here, not be loved, and feel not good. But what we got to remember is that the best way to feel loved is to give love, and to be of service. And having looked at the science of happiness for 20 years, there's two forms of happiness. One is hedonic happiness, where sex, drugs, and rock and roll, like pleasure of the senses, money, fame, clicks on social media, whatever. That it's a high that's all about me, myself, and I. And it's a high that dips really quickly. So you keep wanting more. And then there's eudaimonic happiness, which is when you live for a purpose greater than yourself, acts of compassion, kindness. It can be spirituality, something bigger than yourself that you're giving to, like you were saying earlier, that motivation that can really give you that spark. And that research shows is a form of happiness that doesn't just come and go quickly. It lasts. I would call it fulfillment almost. And it even shows less inflammation at the cellular level. It's really powerful.
You can have a bit of both. So you can have a little bit of a peak of the hedonic happiness. But those people, they just have that and chase that. You talk about addiction before. And addiction can be drugs, it can be alcohol, it can be feedback and titles and watches and everything else, can't it, as well? So it's constantly trying to get that hit. It wears out over time.
That's right. So if I had to summarize the science of happiness as I've been studying for 20 years, it would be in one sentence. It would be the happiest, most fulfilled people live lives characterized by compassion for others with compassion for themselves. I
love that. Does it start with self first? Does it start with others, or is it different pathways for different people?
You definitely need to fill your own cup, but how, is that, is like ice cream every day going to fill your cup? Over time, probably not. But is meditation every day going to do that? Yes. Is spending time in nature going to do that? Yes. So you fill your cup, but at the same time, when you give to others and you elevate others and you help others feel better, it also makes you feel better. So that's this beautiful symbiotic relationship between the two. And it doesn't mean you have to go like feed orphans in Somalia. Like you can be of service by deciding, I want to uplift everyone that I meet. That's enough. Like I want to just share a kind word, even with the person behind the cash register or whoever.
On the 10% Happier podcast, you pose a very interesting question. Can you have happiness and success? And I really like that frame, because I think a lot of people chase happiness as this external. So a lot of people chase success as this external, getting rewards, and miss what it is that actually makes them happy. I prefer the word fulfilled, which links to that eudaimonic definition. But you talk about you can have both. You just got to be really clear on what it is, and you've got to put time and effort into it. And that's what you outlined beautifully in Sovereign. And on a post on that, you said sovereignty is internal freedom and a relationship with yourself, so profoundly life-supportive and energizing that you access your fullest potential, the fullest potential you were born for. It's the inner flame that lifted you up from rock bottom and kept you walking through the darkest of nights. It's the roar of defiance that helped you back to your feet every time you were knocked down, a declaration of your fight and right to live as you, no matter what. It is what has kept you alive despite everything. And when you're a sovereign, you not only experience happiness and well-being, but also maximize your gifts and strengths, bringing out the best in yourself. Beautiful goal to have.
Yeah, that's it, right? We want to be fully alive.
Do you sit here now and feel that you have sovereignty in all parts of your life?
I feel like sovereignty is a journey. But I definitely feel, if you ask me the question, when were you most alive? I'd say right now, like right now. I always feel right now, right now. That's just, I could ask myself that question a lot, but it's always like that fact, like it's right now. When am I happiest? Right now. Like it's just, but sovereignty is a journey. You have to keep going with the practices and the self-awareness. I meditate every day. I do all the things. And then that's it. I have a simple mantra. I'm just like, uplift myself, uplift others. That's it. That's my mantra. And it's a fantastic way to live, not that I don't go through hard times and things like that. Of course I do. But yeah.
I was going to ask you on that. Do you find it now easier to bounce back? Because that's life as we mature. And a lot of the work I'm doing with execs, I'm sure you find similar. It's shifted from some of the problems they had when they were starting their careers. A lot of the execs I'm working with now, it's around aging parents. It's around the transition from young kids and the problems they had to older kids and bigger problems, and managing that outside because they've got full-on lives, and then trying to navigate all that. So as you go through some of those ups and downs in life, do you find it's easier now because you've got this whole data bank of writing and researching? And also I think for you and I, the gift that we have working across sport and defence and across corporate and business is you learn so much from your clients, and you often think, oh my God, I'm going to make sure that I do this as well. But do you find it easier now to bounce back or pull yourself out when you're having a challenging time?
Yeah. And just remember, I just need to bring my mind back. And just bring my mind back, like back into right here, right now, sovereignty, snap out of, there is this happening and it's painful or it's hurtful or it's hard. And here I am coming back to me. And I do a mini exercise of that every single night before I go to bed. I have like an hour without my phone where I meditate, I take a bath, whatever, but just coming back to unplugging from the world, like plug your phone out, plugging it back into me, plugging back into me, and just mini exercise. Yeah, it's amazing because I feel like I can go to sleep with a clear mind.
Put your hands up for me. We're going to do we'll bring in some imagery and we'll try and make this as real as possible. We've got a crystal ball. So can you put your hands around a crystal ball? I'll even get the gypsy music. You're sitting down with a fortune teller, or we're using a bit more science than fortune telling, with the goal setting, with the work you do, with the wonderful impact you're having. If you look in that crystal ball in 5 years, what does it look like? And I love that you took a big breath. So for the people watching this on YouTube, you really did feel that, didn't you? You went,
I've contributed to a movement of sovereignty that is rippling across the world, that people are starting to reclaim their sovereignty, and contributed to other people who are helping people reclaim their sovereignty. And, I always just pray like, okay, make me an instrument, whatever is needed, whatever I can do on this planet while I'm alive, just make me an instrument of that. That's what I want to do. That's my wish. That's it. I take care of my family, but I just want to be of service. And so I ask, and I'm open. I'm stay open. I'm open to what's next, in whatever way I can help. Sometimes the ideas that have come to me are very different from what I'm doing right now. And I'm like, that's okay. Like, I'm open to whatever way I can be of service in the greatest way for the planet.
Here's my observation. Tell me whether it's miles off or whether it's correct. Your goals and what drives you is about impact and difference. And you're totally, as I said before, on brand, on purpose. I think so many people, Emma, have goals around money and those external goals, which is to impress a lot of other people that you don't really like anyway. Often so we buy cars with lots of seats and then no one wants to sit in them. We buy holiday houses with lots of room and no one goes there to stay. But to me, it seems like you really do set this goal around making a difference. And the money then comes. So do you still have some financial goals as well? Do you look at what you like, where you want to live, the finances you want to have? And is that on your radar?
Yes. I mean, I have a wish around that, of course, but I don't actively think about that so much. But I mean, I'm fortunate right now to be doing fine, doing good. But I guess I don't think about that so much. I just have faith. Okay, I'll be taken care of. I have skills. If things get crazy, I have skills. Teach people meditate. If I can't be a faculty at this university, I'll do something else. I just have faith. That it's okay. It'll work out. Whatever it is, if I need to change or pivot, I'll do it.
But you know what I mean? And the reason for asking that question, because I think so many people, they set their goals, it's just on the money, on the car, on the house. And that's why they often end up having the money, the car, the house. And there's a huge gap. There's no sovereignty.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely, I want to be of service. And I trust in my talent. I know I have talents, writing and speaking and other things I can do, uplifting people, bringing people together, moving people toward a goal. I know I can do that. And I just have faith that my life will be of service, in whatever capacity. And I'm always ready to innovate, change it up. I'm go with the flow like that. And I know meditation has taught me that. If we were to pivot all of a sudden, it's like, all right, you're not doing this anymore, you're doing something else. Be like, all right, let's go, let's do this. So
I've got one more question. I call this the flip. So I've loved the dialogue. I've loved finding out about where you come from. Just that learning from different countries and then rolling that into study and then going to psychology. So that range we spoke about. I love that we looked at the delineation for you between what meditation is and mindfulness as a practice of that idleness and building that in, the rigor when you're going through the different brainwaves and how you can dance between that and the pulse. Building in some of your stories you've done with medics, building in some of the stories you've done as well with the military. And just the passion that runs throughout everything you do. And you are totally on brand with what you do about teaching people to be sovereign. Is there a question in preparation you were thinking or had hoped I would ask? So is there a question I've missed? Or the flip, is there a question in wrapping up you'd like to ask me?
I mean, I don't know. I just have a wish that people really understand how much potential they have. And that they just need to dip inside and allow it to reveal itself, And if it helps, then think about how much you can help others with that. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's selfish. Why would I do this thing for myself? It's like, no, it's not for you. When you take care of yourself, you show up as your best for the planet, So, and I know that's what your goal is too with your work.
Totally. There's a real alignment when you say that. I'd love our audience to have more of Dr. Emma Seppälä. So we've had an hour roughly today. You've got an online course. Tell us about that. How can people align? How can people go and work with you more?
So aside from my books, I've just had so many requests over the years to create a course. And I didn't for my first book, The Happiness Track. And so when my second book came out, I was like, okay, I'm going to create a course. It's called The Science of Happiness and Sovereignty. And it's a 6-week program starting January 25th. And you can find out more details on my website, www.iamsov.com. So IAMSOV.com.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links in the show notes as well.
Yeah, and definitely. And I'd be happy to give a special code for your audience or whatever.
We'll put all that in the show notes. Is that course starting that time, or is it an on-demand course? Can you do it at any time, or are you starting?
It's on demand. You can, but it's live. There's a live Q&A during 3 times during those 6 weeks. So if people want to show, the live Q&As are during that time.
Awesome. And good business model to have too.
I will probably put the course online as an on-demand, maybe without the live Q&A.
Yeah, it's a good business model to have both. It's to have that engagement where people can do it, and then have them to do it when they want, where they want.
Yeah, exactly. The live Q&As will be recorded and stuff. So
I've loved it today. I was excited about this, a little bit nervous when I'm interviewing someone like you and you go through the work and, oh, wow, she's done so much. She's written all these books. She's giving so much. I've loved just seeing the warmth, the grace, and just how generous you are. It just jumps out in spades. So thank you. Thank you very much for your time. But thank you for really showing up and totally living what you do.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.